Okay, I'm going to start the session today. So, as I previously discussed, we're still on Learning Unit 1, which is a bit of a concern, being that the assignment still covers quite a lot of learning units at the moment. But nevertheless, this session specifically, we're going to be covering the what we call the PPC, which is the production possibilities curve, or the PPF. It all depends. So usually what I tell the students is I will give you all possible ways in which they can ask it in the exam. I know that you guys have the assignments, but obviously you also have an exam as well. So it can either be a PPC or PPF. So production possibilities curve or production possibilities frontier. It all depends. Okay. So just to start off, just the recap, a little short synopsis and recap of last week's session where we covered the scarcity, the choice, and the opportunity cost. So just to recap on that very quickly, that scarcity is basically the foundation of economics, right? So what we are saying there is everybody has a lot of unlimited wants. Okay, we want a lot of things, but we don't have the means or the resources to meet those wants. So, in terms of resources from a personal avenue, we can then say, in terms of your financing, that's kind of where it comes in. So, what we mean is we have a lot of wants, but we don't have the means to meet those wants, meaning we don't all have the financing to meet all of those wants, right? And that's where our choices then come in. We're constantly deciding how, based on the limited resources that we have, can we then satisfy as many of our wants as possible? Okay. Then we actually looking at that from a personal experience, meaning you and I as consumers, but from a business experience or from a business's perspective, they also have to utilize sort of the same concept, meaning they trying to figure out what goods and services it is that they need to produce for us based on our demand and how are they going to do that. So we are answering the fundamental economic questions being what to produce, how to produce it, and for whom to produce it. Okay, so businesses are also trying to answer those questions, and in doing so, they also have a in terms of scarcity, they don't have unlimited resources. So they also have limited resources that they're working with. And that can be financing, it can be machinery, it can be a lot of different factors from a business's perspective. And they also have choices they ultimately have to make. Right. So in terms of the opportunity cost, again, it's the best alternative that you are giving up. So in terms of you being stuck between making two different choices, right? You then have to look at, okay, what is the cost of me making this choice? I.e., and I used the example in the previous last week to say if you have the choice between taking an iPhone and taking a Samsung, right? The new Samsung that's coming out versus the new iPhone that's going to come out, and the cost of those two phones, what is the alternative? What is the cost that you are giving up to make this choice? So if you opt for the Samsung, for example's sake, and that Samsung is 20,000 Rand, but the iPhone is then 30,000 Rand. Your opportunity cost becomes the 30,000 Rand if you choose the 20,000 Rand Samsung. And this is the concept that usually the accounting students struggle with quite a lot because in accounting, it's very black and white. If you're buying a 20,000 Rand phone, the 20,000 Rand leaves your bank account, you are out 20,000 Rand, but then you have a phone. But economists look at it from a context of saying, yes, the 20,000 Rand has now left your account. Yes, you have the Samsung phone, but at what cost? Right? So you out this 20,000 Rand plus you also looking at the 30,000 Rand you've now given up that. So it's the alternative that you're now giving up or the cost of the alternative that you are giving up. Okay. Then it's also in your textbook it's the basis of economics, and I think it's quite funny sometimes, where we always tell the students there's no such thing as a free lunch. Okay, so in that logic, we are saying that everything that gets given to us at some point in our lives, okay, whether it's from the business, whether it's from the government, it doesn't matter where it comes from. Somebody had to pay for it at some stage. And the easiest concept to remember it is if you're looking at, okay, sorry, I just got an I just got an email from a student asking if we still have class today. But anyway, so if you're looking at it from a concept of the government, right? And I say to the students, I'm like, listen, we all paying taxes, right? Or well, a large majority of us are paying taxes, right? But there is still a large majority of people that are not paying taxes. So if we actually look at South Africa's dynamic at the moment, we're looking at it from about 13% of the population that is paying taxes and almost 87% of our population that is not paying taxes at the moment. Okay, so the 13% kind of have to then cater for the 87%. Technically speaking, we're actually catering for the 100% because we're catering for ourselves as well as the 87% that is not paying taxes. So the 13% of us that are paying taxes and they're using that money to, build roads, fix our robots, all of the fundamental services that we get from the government. I'm not the only one that's utilizing those services. I'm not the only one in terms of the road, for example's sake. I'm not the only one using the road, right? Somebody who's not paying taxes is also utilizing the road, but at what cost? Who's paying for it? So there is always somebody that is paying for something, right? We never get anything for free. It comes from somewhere. That payment came from somewhere. So even if like a business is handing out flyers to you, that business had to pay for the expense of actually printing the flyers. Somebody has to hand them out, meaning there's a salary involved with that. So you're getting the flyer for free, essentially, but it's at what cost? So somebody is always paying for something somewhere, right? And that is now where we're at here with the PPC. Okay. So the logic behind the PPC is that when, and I put the 6th edition and the 7th edition, I'm just admitting people onto the call quickly. I put the 6th edition and the 7th edition because I don't know, some students at this moment still have the 5th edition of the textbook and some now have the 6th edition. You're raising your hand. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, Mohammed?
Ma'am, a lot of us ended up in the wrong link of a different lecturer's group, I think in group 3.
Is a group 3. I did post the link on the ARC, so I'm not too sure where you guys got group 3's lecture.
We've asked, when we asked for on one of the groups, it said for this module, then we asked for your link and then they've sent it and we ended up in group 3 and then some group 2 ended up also there. So it was a bit confusing.
Okay, what I can do is I can ask the team just to resend it out to you guys, but it is on ARC. And it's on your calendars as well. I put it on the calendar as well. Okay, but anyway, let me get back to this. I'll try and resolve that with the team. So in terms of the PPC here, we're looking at it, if we can think about it as an isolated community, right? So we're saying a PPC is a combination of two goods or services that are attainable when a community's resources are fully and effectively employed. In other words, the maximum attainable combinations of these two goods, your potential output. So what we're saying is if we're looking at a community on its own, right? And in this particular community, and the example comes from the textbook, in this particular community, they can only produce fish or they can produce potatoes, okay? They cannot produce any other goods. They can only produce these two. So you can logically think that if, for example's sake, there's only, let's say, 6 employees, in this community, this Wild Coast community. There's only 6 employees. Those 6 employees have 8 hours a day that they are working with, right? So they are splitting their time to say, are we either on the boats, meaning we are fishing, or we on the farm, meaning we are trying to cultivate these potatoes? We either or, right? We can't split ourselves in half. So we're either giving all of our, like possibility A, we are giving all of our resources to potatoes, meaning we are on the farms today, and then no one is on the boats. Or possibility B, meaning some of us are on the boats, but we're only catching one basket of fish. But in doing that, to say, okay, let's say 2 employees are now on the boats and the other 4 employees are still harvesting potatoes. Can you see that because it's not the 6 employees harvesting potatoes, there is a drop in production, okay, to gain that one basket of fish. And if you go to possibility 2, maybe now you say, okay, let's split it. Let's say 3-3. 3 employees go on the boats, 3 employees are in the harvest, and then so forth and so forth and so forth, until you get to a point of saying, now everybody's on the boat and there's nobody in the fields. Okay. Now the argument here is, are you utilizing all of your resources? Meaning you all have the 8 hours. So remember, you actually have 9 hours, but we give you 8 hours because you have 1 hour for lunch. So are you utilizing all of your resources, meaning all of your employees, and they're working full capacity, okay? And then they're utilizing all of the resources, meaning all of the machinery is working efficiently, all of that is happening. So the argument is, even if you're at possibility A, meaning you are 100%, everybody's on the farm plowing the potatoes, versus possibilities F, where everybody's then on the boat, you are still utilizing all of your resources. You are still fully efficient and you are maximizing your potential output for that day. Okay, so the PPC is always a graph where we're looking at a combination of 2 different products, and these are the only 2 products that this community is currently manufacturing. Okay, and I say manufacturing because I know you can't manufacture fish, but okay. So that's where we are. Okay. So when you're looking at it, okay, number 1, we're always labeling our curves, right? So that's the first and foremost. And looking at the textbook, they can either give it to you as, and I didn't check your assignment question, but I'm pretty sure there is a question on this. Either they'll tell you, in this case, potatoes is on the vertical axis, or they can also tell you it's on the X or Y axis. So it's either they're telling you it's the X or the Y axis, or the horizontal and the vertical axis. You should know which axis is which, because all we are going to give you is a combination of 2 different products. And in this case, it was the potatoes and the fish. Okay. So the principle of it is, as much as they're giving you possibilities A through F, and that's how you get the design almost of the PPC, okay? In an exam question, or even in the assignment question, they're not going to give you the possibilities. They expect that you already know the slope or the curve, what the curve actually looks like. Okay, so now for the context of this, we have now given you the different economics is escaping me today, but the different values, and you can actually plot out what your PPC is going to look like, right? From point A all the way to point F. So now we're saying, if you are on the curve, meaning anywhere from point A to point F, you are ultimately utilizing all of your resources, right? So all the employees are doing the best that they can and they have maximized their output. If you are anywhere within the curve, and there we can see it's it would be more point H that's there in the middle, right? Your employees still have the potential to maximize their output because we know what they are capable of doing. They're capable of getting to anywhere on the curve. So if you are in the curve, we're saying you're not utilizing all of your resources, but you essentially are effective. You're just not utilizing all of your resources. So can this community then produce anywhere within the curve? The answer is yes, they can, but they're not utilizing all of their resources. And one of the main concepts that you have to think about in economics is you must be able to utilize all of your resources, thus maximizing your capacity. Okay, otherwise it's pointless, right? Then we have the alternative, which you are then sitting at point G. Now we're saying, okay, if you're at point G, you are completely outside of your resources here. You're not utilizing, you don't have enough resources to get you to point G, right? So unless something changes within your community, i.e. you get more staff, or you get a machine that can help you plow these potatoes, or you get another fishing boat, something has to change in order for you or your community to actually produce to get to point G. But as it currently stands, with you utilizing all of your staff members, your resources, you cannot get to point G. So your point G to this community is completely unattainable. Okay. But the main thing here that they want you to also understand and try and explain to us, you have to explain it to us in the concept of scarcity, choice, and opportunity cost. Okay. So in terms of the scarcity part of it, we're saying, are you utilizing all of your resources? Because that's part of the explanation of what scarcity is. And in terms of choices, are you saying you're going to be at possibility A, possibility B, C, D, E, F? Okay. H shouldn't be an option and neither should G. At what choice are you making it? Are you going to say some employees are going to be on the boat, some are not going to be on the boat, or all going to be on the boat, or some of them going to be on the farm, or is everybody going to be on the farm? Those are part of the choices that you need to make. And then part of that is also explaining to us the opportunity cost, meaning what is the cost that you are giving up in order to gain something. Okay, so if we look at, for example's sake, if you're at point A and you are trying to get to possibilities B or point B, what are you gaining? Okay, so you're going to gain the one basket of fish here at the bottom. But what are you giving up? So what is your opportunity cost? Your opportunity cost becomes the 5 kilograms that you would have produced had you been at A, but now you're at B. So you are giving up the production of 5 kilograms of potatoes to gain that one basket of fish. Okay, so that's always the case with opportunity cost. You are gaining something, otherwise you're not going to do it. If you're not going to gain something out of it, you're really not going to do it. So you constantly, and in this case, you're going to gain one basket every time as you move down the curve. But you can see then as you move down from A to B, you're giving up 5, okay? Then B to C, you're at 95 to 85. So now you're giving up 10. So you're giving up 10, almost double what you gave up to move from A to B. So now you go B to C, you're giving up 10 baskets or 10 kilograms of potatoes. If you go C to D, there's 85 to 70. There you're giving up 15. So as you can tell, the more you're trying to gain of something, the more you have to give up of something else. Okay, so the more you're trying to gain in terms of the production of fish or the catching of these fish, you're ending up giving up more and more and more production in terms of your potatoes. So that what you're giving up to gain this basket of fish becomes your opportunity cost. Okay. And another way that they then say opportunity cost is the trade-off principle. You are trading, you are gaining one, right? But you're giving up something else. So there's constantly a trade here. Okay. And this is ultimately what they also want you to, your curves to ultimately look like. So whether it's in your exam question or whether it's in your assignment, this is how they want you to plot it out. They want you to show us what is your PPC, whether you do or don't have values, irrelevant. The slope of the curve should look exactly the same. Okay. They want you then to show us at what point are you attainable and efficient. So any point on the PPC, meaning you could have been at A, B, C, D, E, or F, you are attainable and efficient because you are utilizing all of your resources. Okay. Any point within the curve, you are attainable, meaning you can get there, but you are inefficient because you are not utilizing all of your resources to its full capacity. Okay. And then any point in point G, you become unattainable. You do not have the resources, whether that be the manpower, financial, or otherwise, to get to that point. Okay. So just be careful on the some questions, and like I asked, I did put it on ARC as well, where I said just look at, in terms of the workbook on page 8 is the example where they were quite specific to say point A is this, point B is this, point C is this. So just make sure as well, if I can't remember if it's in the assignment or not, or even if it's in the exam, that if they say point A, show us where on your PPC point A is where it's attainable and efficient. You have to make sure you're using the right labeling, because you don't want to show me the curve and then you show me the incorrect labeling. Then you're going to lose your marks. You'll gain the mark for giving me the PPC because that's correct, but your pointing will be incorrect and you'll lose marks unnecessarily. Then we're saying, okay, in terms of consumer and capital goods, this is just the example we use. But if we go back to our potatoes and fish, okay, so let's substitute the values here and say it's potatoes and fish as opposed to using consumer goods and capital goods. They're saying something has to happen. Like I said to you, something has to happen in order for us to be able to produce more. Okay, so let's say where capital goods is, we rather use the fish example. Okay, so we're saying something has to happen in order for us to produce more fish. We got a new boat. This boat is now a speedboat. It can catch more. The volume of fish is more. Therefore, we have an increase in our capacity. So because there's an increase in our capacity, we can then catch more fish. Okay, but nothing ever happened to the potatoes. We didn't say any machinery was purchased or any new staff members came in, anything like that happened in terms of the potatoes. So that's why point A remains as is, because nothing has changed here in our ability to produce the potatoes, but something has changed. Okay, and hence we're saying there's an improved technique for producing. And I said, you can use capital goods or consumer goods. It's just the example they use in the textbook. But if you look at the fish and the potatoes, I like to use that example to just to stick to it, to say, if we're looking at fish, so now we have a bigger boat. So something happened that improved our ability to catch more fish. Then we say the curve swiveled outward. Okay, so the terminology in economics is very, very important here. Okay, you can't say the curve has shifted, because usually when we say a curve shifts, it means it's more of a parallel shift, meaning your production for both the potatoes and the fish have increased when we say that. When we say it swivels outward, it usually means that it only applies the increase or the decrease. The boat can also break down, which means your curve can swivel the opposite way, inward, okay? It usually only applies to one area. And in this case, we're saying the fish. We got a better boat, we can then catch more fish. So our curve swivels outward. And also in economics, we're a stickler when it comes to the right and to the left. Okay, to the right in economics is always a positive shift. To the left is always a negative shift. So in this context, we'd say if we got a better boat that now can catch more fish, our curve has swiveled to the right. Okay, so we always start with, where did you start on this curve? I started on PPC point X. Now you guys can label your curves as you see fit. I just tell the students, stick to A, B, C, D, E. It helps, okay? So in this case, according to the textbook, you started on PPC, curve X. Now there's an improvement in a technique, or in this case, you got a better boat, you got more staff that allowed you then to catch more fish. Therefore, your curve has swiveled outwards to the right. And now you're on your new PPC that is on curve Y. Okay, so that becomes your new attainable and efficient curve, is anywhere on this red curve, or curve Y in this case. Okay, then the opposite can be the effect as well, right? In saying that, okay, let's say we didn't get a new boat, but we did get a new plowing machine that allows us now to plow more potatoes, meaning our production now in terms of potatoes has increased. So our curve has also swiveled, but now nothing has happened to the boat. We still have the same boat originally, right? So the curve also swivels outward, but it swivels up in terms of our production of potatoes, and nothing happens to our production for fish. But our new PPC in terms of our fish and potatoes will still be curve I, right? So they will always tell you in the question, our production has increased for whichever product it is. Okay, and if you don't then label your curves correctly, meaning you indicated the correct product in either the vertical or the horizontal curve, you can see then your curve is going to look opposite to what it's supposed to look like. So that's point one. Make sure that you know what is your horizontal curve, what is your vertical curve, which one is your x-axis or your y-axis, to make sure that you're plotting your curves correctly. Right. And this is now what we're also saying, okay? There can be a parallel shift, which means that there's an overall productivity has increased for the production of both goods. Okay, so something can happen in the production of both goods. And the reason why they say it's economic growth, because we're saying our ability, remember, this is almost a small community on its own, a small economy, if you want to put it that way. And this economy can only produce the fish and the potatoes, can't produce anything else. So if something happens now, let's say the workers decide that as opposed to working 8 hours, they're now working 10 hours. Okay, so they've increased their capacity for both, in the production for both, because they have more time. And ultimately, when we are producing more as a community or as an economy, there is economic growth that's happening. Okay, so that's what happens when we then shift our curve outward. There's a parallel, and we say there's a parallel shift outward. There's economic growth in this economy. Or you can have the opposite, right? You can have negative economic growth, meaning there's an inward shift of your PPC. Okay, so if you see on the slides, you'll see this www icon. If you see that on any of the curves, If you actually right click on it, you'll see it's a hyperlink. It takes you to a PDF version. And on that PDF version, it literally shows you step by step on how this curve has been drawn. I don't like to put it slide by slide by slide to show you as it moves slide by slide, because that can become a bit too much. Then the slides just become too much, especially because this module's got so much content. But when you see the www, actually click on it. It will show you step 1, step 2, step 3 as the curve or as the graph gets drawn from point A, your PPC AB, meaning curve AB, right? Something then happened. There was a causation of some sort that caused your curve to shift outward, okay? Moving you then to PPC curve E and F. So there was a parallel shift to the right. Remember, like I said, the right and the left is very important. That's actually where you gain your marks from. You have to tell me it's a shift to the right. It's a movement to the right or to the left, depending on the curve. Okay. And then just to summarize, okay, the nice thing about the textbook is there's a lot of summaries. Okay. So the summary being what would then cause your PPC to shift outward. And remember, it can be a PPC or PPF. We're referring to the same concept, right? So we're saying that either there's an increase in the available resources. Logically, we have more resources, therefore we can produce more. Okay. There's an improvement in the current production techniques, an improvement in technology. So we gain a machine that can now plow these potatoes, or we're gaining a boat that's now bigger that can now catch more fish, right? So it either will affect the one or the other, or we have the funding, therefore we can get the boat and we can get the machine, meaning there's an increase in production of both elements, okay? Or there's an increase in our productivity levels. So as employees, whether we're 6 employees, there is something has changed, and now we can produce more with the 8 hours that we have. And ultimately, when we're producing more, our PPC will shift outwards, meaning shifting to the right, right? And then obviously the opposite can be the effect. What would shift our PPC inward? It's not our desired outcome, but it can happen where there's a decrease in the available resources. So our boat can break down, right? It needs to be serviced. The machine that we're using to plow on this farm, it needs a service. Something can happen, and unfortunately, we do not have the capacity then to produce as much as we used to produce. Okay, there can be a deterioration in terms of the current production techniques. Again, something can change. Improvement, instead of an improvement in technology, something can get worse, because you do get wear and tear. That's what happens in businesses, okay? Or there can be a decrease in production levels, meaning we can lose a staff member for whatever reason. They decide to resign, whatever the case may be, okay? And if we're losing staff members, ultimately we're losing their capacity to produce a good, meaning our output level is now decreased. So our curve will shift inward or shift to the left. Okay. And then this is the summary. It is on page 11 in your textbooks. Okay. So you have to be able to draw the curve and then illustrate all of these points on your curve. Okay. So attainable combinations. The first one is all points on or inside. Remember, inside the curve, as much as you're not utilizing all of your resources, you're still able to attain that point. You can produce within the curve. We're just saying you're not efficient because you're not utilizing all of your resources, but you can produce within your curve. So it's all points in or on your PPC. Unattainable is all points beyond your PPC. That was our point G in the textbook's example. Okay, efficient combinations. So you are only efficient and attainable if you are on the curve. So any point from possibility A to possibility F, you are both attainable and efficient, and that's the desired outcome. Okay. Inefficient combinations here we're saying is anywhere within or inside your PPC. You're not utilizing all of your resources. And by not utilizing all of your resources, where they're coming up with the concept of unemployment there, they're saying that if you are within the curve, you're not utilizing all of your resources, then from a business's perspective, you're not going to make money because you're not utilizing all of your resources. And then ultimately you'll lose money and you'll have to close down, which is going to create the unemployment. Okay. And then if there is an outward shift of your PPC, there's either an increase in potential outputs or productivity levels, something that has then caused your curve to shift outward. Thus, if it shifts outward, meaning there's a parallel shift outward, that is only when there's an, what do we call it now? Oof, my brain. When economic growth has happened is when you have a parallel shift outward. But if we're having the swivel, meaning there's only an increase in production of either the one good or the other good, then we're just saying there's an increase in potential output, but only for the one good or the other good. Or if there's a parallel shift, like I said, then it's economic growth because it's the increase in production of both goods. Okay. Then from the homework question. Okay, so the homework question was, and it came from the workbook, drawing a PPC. So you physically have to put pen to paper here. It's very difficult, especially in the exam. If I can give you one recommendation is you have to, with these curves, you need to draw them over and over and over and over again, because there's no other way to practice it without drawing these curves. Okay, so draw the PPC X and Y for two different products, meaning bread, like I said to you, they always tell you which product needs to go on which axis. And in this case, they still use vertical and horizontal, but they can also say the X or the Y axis. So in this case, the bread being your vertical axis, the milk being the horizontal axis. So there's always two products, always, without fail. There's always two products, and they have to tell you which product goes on which axis. Okay. Then they say label your graph as follows. Point A indicates a maximum attainable combination. Point B indicates an attainable but inefficient combination. Point C is unattainable combination. And then they say briefly explain how your PPF, can you see now how at the start they say draw a PPC. Now when they say explain a PPF, because they want to know that you know that even if we say PPC or we say PPF, we mean the same thing. Okay, so explain how your PPF can be used to illustrate the basic economic concepts. They always say basic economic concepts. And in some areas, they don't tell you of scarcity, opportunity, or choice, opportunity cost or choice. They don't say that part. They'll just say the basic economic concepts, meaning they're hoping that you know it's scarcity, choice, and opportunity cost. Okay. So if we look at that, your curve should roughly look like this. And hence I said, in the textbook, they gave you values so that you can plot your curve. But because economics is on the basis of assumptions, we know what the curve should roughly look like, or the shape of the curve, right? So in terms of bread and milk, make sure your axes are correct, right? And your curve should look roughly like point X, okay? Or curve X, if you want to call it that. Then they say to you point, why are my curves? Okay. This was my, I'll fix this. But obviously point A should have been maximum attainable. So that should have been on the curve. I think while I was drawing and I screenshotted, things moved. Okay, so point A should be anywhere on the curve. I'll just fix that before I upload everything. Point A should be anywhere on the curve. Point B is then within the curve, and then point C is our attainable value. That's outside of the curve. Okay, so the marking is very specific here when we marking a graph question. Okay. One, your labeling has to be correct. And you can see that 1 mark correctly drawn PPF. Okay. 1 mark for the labeling. And what I tend to do is I don't know if I'm going to mark your exams or not. I know I'm going to mark your assignments. I'm not sure on the exams. But I usually give a half a mark if you indicated the bread is on the right axis, and another half a mark if you've indicated the milk is on the correct axis. Because going forward, in terms of the other curves, these things can get you can mix it up. Okay. And it's easier for me to at least try and give the students a half a mark than for me to penalize you in totality. So number one, you always make sure that your curve is labeled correctly before you even start anything. Then make sure the slope of the curve is correct, meaning how the curve is supposed to look is correct. So just based on that, without actually answering the question, you've already gained the 2 marks. Okay. And then point A needs to be correct, point B needs to be correct, and then point C needs to be correct in order for you to get all of your marks. Okay. And then they said 3 marks will be awarded for you trying to explain the basic economic concepts being scarcity, choice, and opportunity cost. And in the context of this example, they're saying scarcity is illustrated as an unattainable combination such as point C. So you always have to give us an example that you are working back off so that we can see you actually understand what you are talking about. Okay, meaning there's not enough resources in the economy to produce at point C, right? That's scarcity. We have limited resources. Okay, in terms of choice, we're saying choice is illustrated. One, you have to tell me what choice is, right? So choice is illustrated by the fact that it is possible to produce any combination of bread and milk as long as you are on the curve. So anywhere on the curve where you've decided to indicate it as point B, you are then attainable and efficient. Okay, so you have to show us that there's both in order for you to get the mark. Okay, and that's also where I tend to give the students half marks. It's not recommended, I can tell you that upfront. It's not recommended that we give half marks, but we do to try and help the students out, especially in the exam. Okay. And then opportunity cost is illustrated by the negative slope of the PPF, meaning you're moving downward. Okay. And to tell you that some of the bread combination will have to be sacrificed in order for you to produce milk. So remember, I said to you, you're always trying to gain something. And in this case, you're trying to gain the production of milk, but then you have to give up something. And in this case, you're giving up the production of bread in order to gain more milk. Or it can be vice versa as well. Okay. You can also try and gain more bread, but by gaining more bread, you also have to give up the production of milk because you don't have enough resources to produce both. Okay, so you're constantly in this trade-off principle. I'm gaining something, but I have to give up something else. Okay, and that's the end of this lesson. So what I am going to do is for learning unit 2, it is very, very, very theory-based. Okay, there is literally not much to understand. There's actually very little to understand. There's just one concept that I do want to point out because it showed up. I think it showed up in last year's exam, just to brief you on. So I am going to do a recording separate on Learning Unit 2, but I do want to start with Learning Unit 3 so that you guys have enough time to then try and complete the assignment. Okay, so I will do a recording and I'll post the recording on Learning Unit 2. Like I said to you, it is purely theory-based. I will load the slides as well for Learning Unit 2 to help you while I'm busy with the recording. Okay, and then next week we will cover then Learning Unit 3 so that you have enough time because I think your assignment's like the 11th of March and I might need both sessions, both next week's session. I can't even remember if there's enough time for the session thereafter just to help you out. No, it's literally the 11th. It's exactly 2 weeks away. Okay, so I might have to do a lot of short videos just to help you out. We'll cover the main concepts next week for learning unit 3, which is the demand and the supply, which is a chunk of your assignment. Okay. And then I'll do smaller videos just to help you guys out. And then if you have any questions, just pop me an email. Like I said, I am a full-time lecturer, but I'm based at the Pretoria campus, but I'm usually on my emails. And I'll try and see. Obviously, I'm not going to give you the right or wrong answer, but I can help guide you, right, in terms of the assignment questions, if that's what you want. I will find out from the team if you guys want a assignment, almost an assignment brief, but usually somebody does do the assignment briefs. And then we can take it from there. So do you guys have any questions for me? Yes.
Ma'am, so basically the assignment 1 is based on lesson 1 to 3.
Yes, so it's not lesson. Remember, we refer to them as learning units. So it's learning units 1 to 3, but learning unit 1 is chapter 1, but chapter 0 and chapter 1, I've already loaded the additional resources for you. So under additional resources, I've loaded the support material, which is learning unit 0, chapter 1. Those two make up learning unit 1. Then learning unit 2 is chapter 2, but learning unit 3 is chapter 3 and 4 together.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Is there anything else before we call it a day? One other thing I am going to mention, I've already loaded your iStask. So I don't know if you guys do or don't know what the iStasks are, but they are small activities that we require that you guys complete for marks. I've already loaded all 6 of them. The best 4 will count towards your semester mark. Okay, I've already loaded that. They all due, I've set them all to be due by the 5th of May, I think it is. Let me just double check myself. Yeah, the 5th of May, Tuesday, the 5th of May, either the 4th or the 5th. I can't remember if it's the Monday or the Tuesday, which is quite far away. But what I tell the students to do is as we work through the learning units, or as you work through the learning units to complete the assignment, then just do the iStask with it, right? Because you're already covering the content. Don't wait until the 5th of May to try and do all 6. As you're working through it to complete the assignment, then also do the iStask, then you know it's done. And like I said, the best 4 will then count towards your semester mark. Okay. Right. If that is it, then I will call it a day. I will load the recordings. I always try and load the recordings either by the Friday or Saturday at the absolute latest. For you guys, and then I'll work on the recording for learning unit 2 so that next week we're covering learning unit 3. So you have at least the week to try and complete the assignment that is due on the 11th of March. Okay, so I hope everybody enjoys your weekend, or enjoys what's left of your week, and then I will see you again next week.